They used to dance on the pitch, not just at Carnival, not just in the sun-baked favelas or the packed bleachers of the Maracanã. Brazil played like a country made of rhythm, unexpected turns, effortless dribbles, a collective improvisation that looked like joy and felt like destiny. But somewhere in the last 2 decades, that music began to slow. The drums got replaced by clocks. The choreography that had once unmade defenses now looked rehearsed, boxed in, strangely polite. Matches that should have been demonstrations of magic became tight, anxious affairs. And when Brazil lost, it no longer felt like an accident. It felt like inevitability. How does the nation that taught the world to fall in love with football find itself flirting with irrelevance? How did the Seleção, the rhythm makers who once made other countries bow, stop being the team the world feared? This is the story of how a football culture built on improvisation, cunning, and abundance started to unravel. A slow, complicated fall made of export deals, institutional rot, stolen atmospheres, and a stolen future. Chapter 1. The Talent Heist. Europe's Quiet Gold Rush. Picture a seaside market. A vendor sells ripe mangoes. The fruit is the best in town. Juicy, fragrant, impossible to replace. Now imagine the market next door has a giant freezer and a massive distribution network. They buy every mango before it can ripen on the tree. That image is not poetry. It's Brazilian football today. For generations, Brazil exported talent, yes, but players matured here, learned their samba inside the public squares, developed chemistry in derbies that burned daylight and night. In the last decade, the export has become a heist. Teenagers shipped across the ocean before they learn how to lead, to read a midfield, to win a season, and carry a club on their shoulders. Numbers tell the simplest truth. Brazil is the world's largest supplier of professional players abroad. Thousands of Brazilians now ply their trade outside the country, and European clubs have built entire scouting pipelines to harvest them. The CIES, Observatory, and other reports have repeatedly placed Brazil at the top of the list of player exporting nations, with figure after figure showing the dizzying scale of the exodus. Clubs in Sao Paulo and Belo Horizonte no longer aim to build dynasties. Their balance sheets are designed with a single cornered line: sell talent. Youth academies, once classrooms, are now commodity factories. Coaches are judged as much on how high they can drive a transfer fee as on whether a team wins the Campeonato Brasileiro. The Copina, the youth tournament that used to be a showcase of future legends, has become a shopping fair. Scouts arrive with briefcases and contracts, and promising players disappear into planes bound for Madrid, London, or Munich. The result is a domestic league starved of its brightest young light. Top clubs end up patching squads with veterans who return to their 30s or journeymen who move season to season. Fans watch a Sunday match that looks pretty on the box but lacks the electricity of a culture's next generation rising together. And the Seleção? Instead of a national spine built from a decade of shared club football, a midfield partnership grown and tempered in Brazil coaches increasingly have to assemble a team of stars who have never played with one another. Talent is abundant, but cohesion is not. Players arrive as finished products with different footballing educations, trained by elite European academies, and then parachuted into Brazil's national project. The chemistry takes longer. The trust is thinner. A national identity becomes a collage. Chapter 2. The Federation Fiasco. Steering with broken instruments. Imagine a great orchestra where the conductor vanishes mid-concert and is replaced by a series of temporary substitutes, some skilled, some not, each with their own preferences and their own agenda. That metaphor collapses into the reality inside the Confederação Brasileira de Futebol. Administrative chaos, scandals, and a revolving door management culture have hollowed out leadership just when the country needed steady direction. This is not mere headline grabbing. The institution that should steward Brazilian football has been distracted by scandal and internecine warfare. Presidents suspended amid harassment investigations, public quarrels, and policy failures, and an inconsistent long-term project for the national team. Public trust has been eroded. On the touchline, Brazil has cycled through multiple coaches in quick succession. Since 2022, the national side has seen a carousel of managers and philosophies, preventing the team from settling into a lasting tactical identity. Players arrive with different instructions, and the national project becomes a patchwork of interim fixes. A nation famous for producing tactical mavericks has found itself with no coherent plan. Add to that the toxic theater of public relations blunders, symbolic choices, odd omissions on squad lists, and moments where the Federation seemed to make headlines for the wrong reasons, and you end up with the kind of institutional rot that eats away at morale. The world watches, critics circle, and comparisons with other now stable national projects are inevitable. If you want to make a country win for a decade, you need a federation that plans for decades. Brazil, for too long, has not. Chapter 3, Vanishing Samba, when style is replaced by simplicity. The phrase Jogo Bonito, the beautiful game, is often reduced to nostalgia. But there was something practical about it, a philosophy of football that prized creativity, space, and collective improvisation. For tourists and pundits, the movement was a style. For Brazilians, it was gospel. Over the years, that gospel has been rewritten. Youth systems, pressured by results and profit, began to prioritize speed, structure, and a kind of modern athleticism over improvisation. A creative midfielder, that old school Hashin Zero, who might have seen the whole pitch and pulled threads through the defense, is pushed wide, repurposed as an athlete-first winger. Coaches, underpaid and under threat, chase the immediate win. The long apprenticeship of a flair-based system becomes a luxury few can afford. There is a quiet cultural contagion at work. European methods seep in through returning players and coaches who bring the latest conditioning regimes, pressing systems, and positional rigidity. That's not inherently bad. Modern football demands structure, but it can hollow out the cultural DNA. Where once the national team was a tapestry woven by improvisation, it now looks, at times, like 7 isolated stars, waiting for the key pass that never comes. This loss is subtle but real. Matches that used to feel like living paintings now resemble carefully framed photographs, every compositional element in place, but the soul, the unpredictable riff, absent. Fans who grew up on street football feel the difference. They say the team is predictable and individualistic. Opponents no longer need to fear Brazilian unpredictability as much as they once did. Chapter 4, The Rise of the Rivals, Learning to Beat the Samba. Football is an arms race. When a nation dominates for decades, others study, copy, and then improve. Argentina, Uruguay, and even smaller nations have, over the past 20 years, built systems that marry grit with structure. Argentina's renaissance culminated in a World Cup win and an obsession with tactical unity. Uruguay, with a minuscule population compared to Brazil's, has developed a disciplined, collective model that stifles flair through sheer organization. While Brazil exported its best players, neighbors invested in coaching, philosophies, and continuity. They replaced improvisation with a plan. Brazil's brilliance, for all its glamour, became something rivals could prepare for. We used to be the ones teaching, some pundits say. Now we are the ones being studied. South America's competitive balance shifted. Long-lost rivals retooled. Small federations created coherent pipelines. Managers embraced rigorous tactical systems. Brazil's failures in regional and intercontinental tournaments began to feel less like flukes and more like a symptom. The rest of the continent had simply caught up, and in some cases overtaken, by making football a national, organized project rather than a series of brilliant individual episodes. Chapter 5, Selling the Dream, Academies as Factories. You can trace any large collapse to a small decision repeated thousands of times. In Brazil's case, the decision was simple: monetize youth now. Clubs that once nurtured players as long-term assets learned that a 16-year-old sold to Europe pays club wages and rescues balance sheets. The economics are brutal but simple. Transfer fees can make or break a club's year. That pressure percolates down. Youth coaches, paid pittance for development work, are forced to show results quickly, not in the form of sustained tactical understanding, but in scouts' interest and transfer-ready performances. The incentive structure rewards players who shine in short bursts, not those who learn patience, two-footedness, or how to control a midfield through seasons of adversity. A particular casualty of this model is the notion of position mastery. In some academies, a gifted playmaker is moved to the wing or into a role that emphasizes speed because it is more marketable. The player's central vision, the ability to dictate tempo, is never fully taught. Clubs cultivate above-average players and push them to market before they learn how to control a game. The Capina, once a festival of talent development, has morphed into a televised transfer showcase. Scouts, agents, and intermediaries use youth tournaments to auction teenage futures. And when those futures leave the league, what remains is a system that produces raw skill without the scaffolding of experience. Chapter 6, the gentrified game, stadiums without souls. If talent leaves and administration flounders, another blow came from a place most fans never expected: the stands. When Brazil hosted the 2014 World Cup, the country celebrated new arenas, architectural marvels meant to announce Brazil's modernity. In practice, those renovations removed cheap standing areas, the gyré, and replaced them with corporate boxes and comfortable seats. Stadium capacities shrank drastically. The Maracanã, once capable of holding over 100,000 people packed in unimaginable waves, became a safer, smaller, corporate-friendly coliseum. Seats were installed, rules enforced, and comfortable ticket prices meant fewer ordinary people could afford a match. The consequence was not simply numerical. The working-class melody of drums, flags, and homemade chants, the heart of Brazilian matchday culture, became muffled. You can fix roofs and install better toilets. You cannot easily replace the 16th man, the spontaneous, chaotic atmosphere that makes a stadium feel alive. Football's social ecology changed. The stadium ceased to be the city's parlor and became, instead, a sanitized showroom. Corporate sponsors swapped banners for flares. The party dwindled, and with it, a feedback loop. Players saw fewer fevered, improvised nights. Young kids were less likely to grow up dreaming of something they could not afford. The soul of football, the thing that lives between the touchlines and the crowd, had been quietly priced out. Chapter 7. The short-term fixes. Coaches, transfers, and the blame game. When a system falters, people flip to quick solutions. Hire a new coach, sack another, buy a marquee name, ship the old guard out. Those tactics can produce temporary spikes, but rarely fix the bones of the problem. Brazil's federation tried quick remedies: managerial changes, tactical tinkering, and heavy reliance on players who performed well in Europe. But quick fixes require a base to land on: institutional continuity, domestic talent pathways, and committed youth coaching. Without those, managerial changes merely shuffle an already creaky deck. The political theater around football has not helped. Public scandals and noisy controversies strip attention from reform. When the headlines are about internal investigations, hate speech claims, and administrative misconduct, there is less political will to rebuild youth pay systems, restructure academies, or reimagine stadium access. The result is predictable: stopgap solutions that paper over the symptom but leave the disease crawling under the carpet. Chapter 8. The human stories, 2 kids, 2 futures. To understand the loss, look at 2 teenagers. One grows up in a poor neighborhood outside Sao Paulo. He learns to play with a makeshift ball, practices in the street, and joins a local academy. There, he's taught to read a game, to sit in a midfield and control tempo. He plays the youth leagues for 3 seasons, develops patience, and is only exported at 22, after he has led his club to trophies and learned the art of leadership. The other is a 17-year-old who spends a breakout copina. Scouts swoop. A European giant offers a contract and promises a pathway to riches. The player leaves at 18, all the glamour and bright lights, but arrives in a culture where he must adapt to rigid tactical roles and ruthless competition. He sits on the bench for long stretches, his learning curve interrupted. Years later, he returns, not as the matured leader his home club dreamed of, but as someone whose stellar domestic apprenticeship never occurred. Which of these players makes a national spine? The first. But the market often rewards the second. Chapter 9. When neighbors overtake you. While Brazil wrestled inward, others forged forward. Argentina retooled its youth pipeline and managerial philosophy. Uruguay reinforced collective discipline. Colombia built sturdier midfield structures. Investment in coaching education, consistency in management, and less frenetic export strategies gave these nations an edge. Regionally, the balance changed. The Seleção, always a step ahead by raw talent, found itself reacting rather than leading. Tournaments that were once Brazil's playground ended with new scripts. Argentina lifting cups, Uruguay priding itself on organization, Colombia surprising with tactical maturity, South America became less a crown and more a crowded field. There is irony in this. Brazil's export machine made the rest better. When top talents move abroad early, they seed other leagues' development, sometimes inadvertently helping opponents study and counter Brazil's strengths. You export talent to Europe, and Europe returns tactical knowledge. Other South American nations borrowed, stole, and adapted those lessons faster than Brazil could refocus at home. Chapter 10, The Cost, a national identity on the line. This decline is not merely athletic. Football in Brazil was never just a game, it was an identity. For many, to play like Brazil was to act like Brazil. Improvisational, exuberant, communal. The stadiums, the streets, the favela games, they reinforced a national psychology. As the style faded, so did a part of the national narrative. The Seleção's troubles were not only about missing trophies, they were a cultural rupture, a sense that the country was losing not just matches, but the way it imagined itself. The costs are generational. When kids stop seeing vivid, affordable stadium nights and when their best idols are carted off to foreign leagues at 17, the pipeline for national identification phrase. Football becomes a commodity rather than a commons. Chapter 11, Not All Is Lost, Where Repair Begins. This story is not purely a tragedy. There are levers to pull. First, rethink incentives. Youth structures must reward patience. Clubs need to be incentivized to keep players longer, perhaps through revenue sharing agreements for transfers, domestic solidarity fees, and regulatory changes that encourage sustained development rather than immediate sale. Second, rebuild the federation's credibility. Transparency, long-term planning, and a professionalized administrative culture matter. National projects need architects, not interim managers. Stable coaching tenures and a shared tactical DNA would give a generation something to anchor to. Third, revive the stands. Affordable tickets, community sections, and programs to reconnect ordinary Brazilians with match days would restore match day electricity. Soul is not a policy, but policies can create the conditions where soul flourishes. Fourth, invest in coaches. Better pay and career paths for youth coaches would retain talent and create continuity. The teacher who shapes a player at 13 is often the same person who can guide their development through 18 and 21. And finally, perhaps most crucially, stop treating players like loan commodities. If development becomes an end in itself again, Brazil's clubs will produce leaders and whole players, not just talented exports. Finale, the rhythm may return. Brazil's story is not done. The country still produces a parade of dazzling talent athletes who can change matches with a single touch. The cultural DNA that birthed Pelé, Zico, Romario, and Ronaldinho is still visible in street games, in little boys' imaginations, in backyard freestyles. But restoring the throne will take time, humility, and structural reform. It will require making trade-offs, slowing the export pipeline, strengthening institutions, and reconnecting football to the people who make it holy. If Brazil can re-anchor its football in long-term thinking, if academies relearn that education and experience matter, if the federation sets down a plan that survives a season or a political scandal, then the dance can resume. The Samba isn't dead. It's perhaps only resting between the cracks of a system that needs mending. When that rhythm returns, it won't be because of a single transfer or a single coach. It will be because a nation remembered what it felt like to create rather than sell, to risk patience over instant profit, and to make football a shared inheritance again. Until then, the world will watch a team that looks like Brazil on paper and sounds like Brazil in sparks of talent, but inside, sometimes it will fret that the music has been muted. And the question will linger: can the country that taught the world how to dance learn to choreograph its future once more?